When Metropolis entered production in 1925, Germany's film industry was at a crossroads. One of its largest studios, UFA, had grown into one of the most ambitious film enterprises in Europe, yet it was operating under significant financial pressure as inflation, cultural shifts, and foreign competition reshaped what audiences expected from cinema. At the same time, some German filmmakers were looking for ways to push the medium forward through scale, visual experimentation, and modern architectural design. It was a period of high ambition and high risk, where each major production needed to justify itself not only as entertainment, but also as a statement about the capabilities of German filmmaking. Within this climate, a film from director Fritz Lang became one of the most expansive studio projects attempted in the silent era. Its combination of large-scale sets, technical experimentation, and depictions of modern urban anxiety made it distinctive even by UFA's standards. Welcome to the Cinematic Century Chronicle, and this is Metropolis. This video contains spoilers. If you haven't seen Metropolis yet, I recommend pausing here, watching the most complete, restored version available, and returning when you're ready. Also, apologies for any mispronunciations, and thank you for understanding. Understanding the scale of Metropolis means beginning with Babelsberg, the studio complex outside Berlin that served as the epicenter of German film production in the 1920s. By the time Metropolis was greenlit, Babelsberg had already proven itself capable of supporting large-scale projects, but nothing on the level of what Lang envisioned. A significant portion of Babelsberg's major departments, set construction, costuming, lighting, special effects, carpentry, and metalworking, were pulled into the production at various points. This intense coordination among departments created a working ecosystem unlike anything UFA had attempted before. In interviews decades later, crew members noted that the sets for Metropolis did not feel like temporary constructions. They felt permanent. They occupied so much space and required so much maintenance that Babelsberg's day-to-day operations had to be reorganized around them. You can sense this in the final film. Even though the environments are clearly designed for specific shots, they have the weight and presence of functional architecture. The look of the city in Metropolis emerges from overlapping architectural ideas circulating in the early 20th century. Germany had been a major contributor to expressionist cinema earlier in the decade, but by the mid-1920s, filmmakers and architects were turning toward more structured, modern forms. The design identity of Metropolis draws from these developments in three interconnected ways. Expressionist cinema had long used architectural exaggeration to communicate emotional or psychological tension, while Metropolis does not use the asymmetric distortions of films like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. It retains the expressionist sense of scale. Its towers are oversized. Its machinery dominates the frame. Another major influence on the film was the rapid growth of the American skyscraper. Lang traveled to New York during the planning stages, and the visit inspired the film's vertical cityscape. You see this influence most clearly in the multi-level road systems and the towers that widen as they reach the ground. These features mirrored real-world trends in skyscraper construction, especially in a city where zoning laws and engineering techniques shaped building silhouettes. The third influence comes from the broader currents of German modernist architecture emerging at the time, particularly the clean geometry and functional clarity associated with movements like New Objectivity and, to a lesser extent, early Bauhaus thinking. These approaches emphasize clarity, order, geometry, and functional design, qualities that appear throughout the administrative and managerial spaces of Metropolis. In these areas, the architecture is precise and minimal, reflecting the logical control of those who plan the city. This contrasts with the workers' underground environment, where space becomes compressed, repetitive, and utilitarian. What stands out across all these influences is the logic behind the city's spatial hierarchy. Elevated spaces, the gardens, terraces, and high walkways feel open and unconstrained. Lower spaces feel compressed and restricted. The design communicates social stratification before a single character appears. The practical construction of the city remains one of the film's most impressive feats. The iconic visuals, multi-level highways, aircraft gliding between towers, compressed layers of traffic were achieved almost entirely through practical methods. Long before digital compositing, the filmmaking team relied on miniatures, mirrors, and precision lighting. The miniatures were built on an unusually large scale, some reaching several meters in height. Building surfaces were textured with incredible care so that they would catch and reflect light realistically. This physical shaping helped Karl Freund and special effects designer Eugen Schuftan control depth within the frame, working in concert with the film's lighting and mirror compositing techniques. Lighting was one of the most challenging aspects of miniature photography. Miniatures must be lit with extreme precision. Even slight inconsistencies can make scale noticeable. The crew used powerful arc lamps aimed through small diffusers to simulate daylight. Narrow beams created highlights on building edges, while controlled ambient fill reinforced the illusion of a large atmosphere. The Schuftan process allowed actors to appear inside these miniature environments. The technique used a specially prepared mirror, reflective in some areas and transparent in others, placed at an angle in front of the camera. One portion of the mirror reflected the miniature city, the other portion allowed live-action footage to pass through. By adjusting the angle and masking parts of the mirror, the crew merged the two images in camera. This gave the impression that characters were physically present within spaces that were, in reality, only a few feet tall. One moment I've always appreciated appears late in the film, when Maria is chased through the streets by an enraged crowd. The production blends miniature city models with small-scale figures to place that frantic movement directly into the center of the metropolis. Even in its brief appearance, the shot demonstrates how carefully the effects team integrated human action into the larger architectural design of the city. The underground worker city reflects a different set of design priorities. While the upper levels of Metropolis draw from modernist ideas about function and clarity, the lower levels draw from concerns about mechanization and labor. Germany in the 1920s was undergoing rapid industrial change. Discussions about factory conditions, worker rights, and urban housing dominated public life. Instead of depicting a realistic factory environment, the film presents the worker city as an intensified industrial landscape. The machinery is oversized, the corridors are compressed, and the rhythms of labor feel deliberately exhausting. The design emphasizes the physical strain of the workers' world and underscores the distance between their environment and the ordered architecture above ground. One of the most effective choices in the worker city sequences is the controlled movement of the workers themselves. The film frequently shows long lines of laborers entering or leaving their shifts in synchronized formation, emphasizing the scale and routine of the industrial system. The pacing and blocking in these moments are precise, showing the workers moving within a tightly regulated system that defines the rhythm of life underground. It's a clear demonstration of how physical staging shapes the viewer's understanding of the worker city's environment. Metropolis uses intertitles as integrated visual elements rather than simple text cards. Throughout the film, typography becomes part of the overall design strategy, mirroring movement, reinforcing hierarchy, and amplifying emotional or symbolic moments. Seen in chronological order, the intertitles create a parallel visual architecture that interacts with the narrative and the world of the city. The first notable example occurs as the workers descend in elevators during the opening movement of the film. The accompanying intertitle scrolls downward from the top of the frame, mirroring their motion, and aligning the flow of text with the mechanics of the environment. The choice reflects the film's interest in verticality and in visualizing hierarchy through spatial design. Shortly afterward, another intertitle appears not as a rectangle, but as a triangle, a rare deviation from silent film conventions. Its layout emphasizes a narrow point at the top supported by a wide base, echoing the film's class structure, a small elite sustained by a vast labor force. Even though the shape introduces a slightly stylized touch, it reinforces one of the film's central ideas through graphic composition alone. A more expressive use of typography appears when Freyder hallucinates the machine transforming into Moloch. The intertitle associated with this moment uses stylized lettering that appears energized and unstable, matching the intensity of the hallucination and blurring the line between text and image. It becomes part of the psychological effect rather than a neutral narrative insert. Later, during the Tower of Babel parable, the word Babel appears in heavy, sculptural lettering that seems to drip or melt, giving the title a physical weight within the frame. The textured, almost metallic design matches the monumental quality of the sequence and underscores its mythic tone. The intertitle functions as both text and graphic ornament, carrying symbolic force through its visual form. Across these moments, Metropolis treats intertitles as deliberate design choices. Their movement, shape, and texture support the film's architecture and its thematic concerns, making text an active component of the film's visual identity rather than a pause in the cinematic flow. Early in the film, the machine hall explosion marks one of the more technically demanding and visually controlled sequences attempted at Babelsberg during the silent era. The effect was achieved using a combination of pyrotechnics, smoke, and layered exposures, supported by stunt performers who were pulled backward by concealed wires to simulate the force of the blast. Production notes indicate that the shot required multiple takes to coordinate the timing of the practical effects with the performers' movements, creating a moment that feels jarring even by modern standards. What follows is a brief shift into stylized imagery. As Freda reacts to the explosion, the machine appears to transform into a towering figure, identified as Moloch, with rows of workers march toward its mouth. This part of the sequence uses costumed extras, atmospheric smoke, and composite photography to merge the real machinery with Freder's imagined vision. The result is a sudden visual rupture within the film's otherwise grounded approach to the worker city, an expressionistic interlude anchored in precise technical construction. When the hallucination ends, the film returns to its characteristic visual restraint. Injured workers are carried out of the machine hall in silhouette, framed against intense backlighting that reduces their bodies to dark, uniform shapes. The staging places them close to the camera, while Freda stands farther back in the composition, creating a layered image in which distance and scale amplify the sense of detachment. The silhouetted figures move in steady, deliberate pacing, emphasizing the controlled rhythm of the working environment even in moments of crisis. One of the most striking choices in this sequence is how the aftermath mirrors the labor structure that preceded it. As the injured workers are taken away, new workers step into position with the same regulated spacing and movement. The transition is presented without emphasis or commentary. Visually, the sequence reinforces how the underground city treats labor as interchangeable, a continuous cycle in which the presence or absence of any individual worker does not alter the machinery's rhythm. The lighting, blocking, and framing work together to convey the loss of individuality that defines the system. In a film dominated by modernist skyscrapers and industrial machinery, the catacombs introduce a distinctly different visual language. These underground spaces are staged with rough stone surfaces, narrow walkways, and controlled beams of light that cut through the darkness, giving them a mood closer to ritual and reflection than the efficiency of the city above. The setting feels older and more tactile, positioned outside the architecture of Metropolis and grounded in traditions that predate the film's futuristic design. Maria's early scenes with the workers take place entirely within these catacombs. The lighting is arranged to emphasize the verticality of the space. Shafts of light fall from openings above, catching dust in the air and defining the contours of the gathering. The effect creates a clear focal point within the dim environment and frames Maria in a way that highlights her role as a steady guide for the workers. Her presence is defined less by grand architecture and more by the focused, intimate staging of these subterranean gatherings. The Gothic cathedral appears elsewhere in the film, serving different narrative and visual functions. Freder's early visit to the cathedral introduces a space defined by tall arches, long aisles, and a heightened sense of vertical scale, and the building becomes central again in the final act. Its design creates a sharp contrast with the structured modernism of the upper city and the industrial compression of the worker districts. Within the broader context of the film, the cathedral serves as a reminder of architectural traditions outside the world of machines and modern planning. Even in a story defined by mechanization and accelerated progress, these scenes demonstrate how older architectural forms can provide contrast and dimension within the larger world of the film. The Tower of Babel parable is one of the clearest stylistic departures in Metropolis. The scene uses harsh, overhead light that washes out the sky and flattens the background, giving it a visual quality that feels separate from the film's constructed environments. This brightness creates an almost mythic atmosphere, reinforcing the idea that the imagery reflects a story being told rather than a space belonging to the film's contemporary world. The workers appear in tightly coordinated groups whose movements follow strict patterns. The intensity of the sun softens individual features and gives the figures a uniform appearance, presenting labor as a collective effort shaped by repeated rhythms of movement. The scale of the moment comes through the number of bodies in motion and the clarity of the formations they create. Later in the sequence, an elevated figure directs the workers, and the crowd surges upward in one of the film's most striking uses of directional motion. The bright environment, layered bodies, and rapid ascent work together to create imagery that feels distinct from the architectural precision found elsewhere in Metropolis. UFA's experience producing historical and biblical epics earlier in the decade informed the controlled staging scene here, even as the sequence adopted a deliberately abstract visual style. The parable itself would have been familiar to contemporary audiences. Discussions about unity, social organization, and political fragmentation were common during the Weimar period, and stories about collapsed ambition carried strong cultural resonance. By invoking the Tower of Babel, the film places Metropolis within a longer lineage of grand human projects shaped by both ambition and strain. The stylistic shift gives the parable its narrative function. By presenting it through heightened illustrative imagery, Lang separates mythic history from the film's modern world while using shared themes, labor, scale, and coordination to draw a line between past and future. This creates a point of connection between Maria's storytelling and the film's later exploration of technological creation, emphasizing the continuity of human effort across time. Rotwang's laboratory is one of the most distinctive spaces in Metropolis, and it reflects a design philosophy unlike any other environment in the film. While the upper city is defined by clean geometry and the catacombs rely on rough, organic textures, the laboratory combines curved walls, metallic surfaces, and experimental machinery to create a deliberately eccentric, scientific space. The set draws from earlier depictions of laboratories in European cinema, as well as images of alchemical workshops, giving it a hybrid identity that bridges mysticism and technology. The creation of the Machine Man required a combination of performance, costume design, and visual effects planning. The suit worn by Brigitte Helm was constructed from molded components shaped specifically to her body. Its rigidity limited her range of motion, so every gesture had to be planned in advance. Helm's performance contrasts sharply with her movement as Maria. Here, her motions are slower, more deliberate, and shaped by the restrictions of the costume. The transformation sequence remains one of the major technical accomplishments of silent era effects work. The light rings were created as separate filmed elements on dark backgrounds and then added to the laboratory footage using multiple exposures and precise alignment during the compositing process. Because each pass had to register exactly with Brigitte Helm's position, the effect depended on strict control over timing, exposure, and camera stability. Even minor variations could disrupt the composite, so the process required close coordination between the effects team and the performers on set. The result is a sequence where animated light, electrical machinery, and Helm's stillness come together with unusual precision, giving the transformation its enduring impact. The Yoshiwara nightclub sequence marks another departure from the film's usual visual style. The nightclub is constructed around shifting light, layered composition, and heightened energy. Machine Maria's performance is staged in an environment built to emphasize spectacle. The lighting design drives much of the sequence's effect. The costume used for this scene is designed around sharp contrast. The shimmering fabric reflects the stage lights in moving highlights, enhancing the mechanical precision of her gestures. The choreography intentionally exaggerates angular movements, creating a performance that feels both human and artificial. Brigitte Helm's control over posture and timing gives the scene its distinctive rhythm. One of the most notable techniques in this sequence is the use of superimposed imagery. Crowds appear layered into the frame, their reactions multiplied and arranged in overlapping compositions. A similar use of superimposed eyes appears again during a later moment in the catacombs, when the machine version of Maria is presented before the workers. In that scene, the imagery intensifies as the crowd responds to her presence, and the repeated photographic technique links the two environments. This continuity highlights how Lang applies the same visual device across different settings to convey the force and reach of the Machine Maria's influence. The flood sequence in Metropolis represents one of the most physically demanding undertakings of the entire production. This sequence required the crew to work directly with large volumes of water inside a soundstage. To manage the effect, UFA constructed reinforced set walls and sealed the stage floors to prevent leakage. Elevated holding tanks were built so water could be released from above, creating rapid surges that would read clearly on camera. Filming with water presented challenges that differed from other parts of the production. Pumps were positioned around the perimeter of the set to recirculate water between takes, and the crew had to regulate temperature, water flow, and drainage to maintain control over the environment. One of the most demanding aspects of the sequence was the participation of extras, including children. Contemporary accounts note long hours spent in cold water and the strain of working under powerful surges released during takes. While this reflects the practical realities of filmmaking in the 1920s, it also underscores the sheer physical effort behind the scene. Coordinating large groups under these conditions required planning not just from the assistant directors, but from the entire crew responsible for safety, pumps, and water flow. What stands out today is the physical weight of the imagery. The water interacts with the sets and performers in ways that digital simulations struggle to replicate. In a film defined by scale, architecture, and effects work, the flood sequence demonstrates UFA's willingness to stage a scene that relied as much on physical endurance as on visual design. The performances in Metropolis are often noted for their clarity and expressive precision. Brigitte Helm's dual role as Maria and the Machine Man is central to the film's emotional impact. As the real Maria, Helm conveys calmness and moral clarity through controlled movements and soft gestures. Her interactions with the workers are grounded in compassion, and her presence in the catacomb scene is strengthened by subtle posture and eye focus. As the Machine Man, Helm adopts sharper, more angular motions. Her movements become rhythmic and mechanical, emphasizing the character's artificial origins. The contrast between the two performances is a key part of the film's visual and emotional structure. The production of Metropolis placed considerable financial pressure on UFA. The studio committed an unusually large share of its resources to the project, viewing it as an opportunity to present German cinema on the same industrial scale as contemporary Hollywood spectacles. As the sets grew more complex and the production timeline extended, the budget expanded well beyond initial projections. UFA's leadership faced scrutiny from investors and distribution partners, particularly those expecting the film to perform strongly in international markets. The studio was operating during a period of economic volatility in Germany, and the scale of Metropolis made it a central topic in ongoing discussions about the sustainability of large productions. The prolonged shoot also affected the scheduling of other films, increasing internal pressure to recover costs quickly upon release. Despite these concerns, UFA maintained confidence that the film's ambition would demonstrate the capabilities of Germany's film industry. The expectation was that Metropolis would bolster the studio's international standing through its technical innovation and visual scale. While the film received significant attention at the time of its premiere, its initial commercial performance was uneven, and the financial strain it created influenced the studio's production strategies in the years that followed. The Berlin premiere of Metropolis in January 1927 was a major cultural event. Audiences and critics responded strongly to the film's visual ambition, its large-scale staging, and its elaborate effects work. Contemporary reviews often praised the technical achievement while expressing mixed feelings about the narrative structure and allegorical framing. The premiere version was notably long, and its scale contributed both to admiration and to early discussions about its pacing. Following the premiere, the film entered international distribution under arrangements that included American partners such as Paramount. These distributors prepared shortened versions for foreign markets, reducing the runtime and restructuring segments to emphasize plot clarity over the expansive pacing of the Berlin version. The American edition made substantial alterations to character relationships and narrative emphasis, creating a version that differed significantly from the cut shown in Germany. These changes shaped how international audiences understood the film for decades. Because many viewers encountered only these edited versions, Metropolis developed a fragmented reception history. Scenes central to the film's structure were missing from widely circulating prints, and different regions often screened materially different versions of the story. This uneven circulation underscored the importance of later restoration efforts, which sought to reconcile the surviving materials into a form closer to the structure of the premiere version. For much of the 20th century, Metropolis existed only in incomplete or heavily altered versions. Different international cuts circulated, shaped by distributor edits, censorship decisions, and the physical deterioration of film materials. As a result, key scenes were missing, character arcs were incomplete, and the original narrative structure was difficult to reconstruct. Earlier restoration efforts in the 1980s and early 2000s attempted to assemble a more coherent version, but the absence of crucial footage limited how closely they could approximate the premiere cut. The discovery of a 16mm reduction print in Buenos Aires in 2008 transformed the film's preservation history. This print contained extended sequences long thought lost, offering material that significantly clarified transitions, character motivations, and plot developments. Although the print's condition reflected years of wear, it provided the most complete source for the film since the 1927 release. The restoration process required integrating the newly discovered footage with existing 35mm elements. Preservation teams stabilized the 16mm material, performed frame-by-frame repairs, and adjusted contrast and density to create visual continuity across formats. The difference in texture between the sources remains visible, but it serves as a reminder of the film's complex circulation history and the challenges of reconstructing a work that survived in fragmented form for decades. The resulting restoration brings contemporary viewers closer to the structure and scope of Lang's original version. Metropolis has left a lasting imprint on the visual and technical language of cinema. Its layered cityscape, built through miniatures, architectural design, and in-camera compositing, became a foundational template for how filmmakers imagine futuristic urban environments. Echoes of its vertical structures, illuminated skylines, and interplay between architecture and machinery appear in films ranging from Blade Runner to Dark City, and in countless animated and live-action science fiction works. The design of the Machine Man remains one of the film's most enduring contributions. Its streamlined metallic surfaces, sculpted contours, and expressive rigidity helped shape how robots would be depicted for decades. Later screen characters, mechanical, synthetic, or humanoid, often draw visual lineage from this design. Technically, the film remains essential to early effects history. The shift-time process is still studied as a major milestone in in-camera compositing, and the film's miniature photography, lighting strategies, and large-scale crowd coordination continue to influence how practical effects are taught and understood. The restoration history of Metropolis is equally significant. Its decades-long fragmentation, the variations between international cuts, and the rediscovery of the Buenos Aires print turned the film into a key case study in archival reconstruction. The differences between the surviving materials, high-resolution 35mm footage, the lower-resolution 16mm Buenos Aires print, and a few remaining gaps indicated by explanatory intertitles, illustrate both the fragility of early cinema and the potential of modern restoration. Across these many facets, design, performance, effects work, and preservation, Metropolis has become a central reference point in discussions about how early cinema imagined the future, and nearly a century after its release, it still stands as a visually ambitious landmark of silent-era filmmaking. Next time on Cinematic Century Chronicle, we'll stay in 1927 and examine Wings, a film that expanded the possibilities of aerial photography and large-format action staging during the silent period. Subscribe and join me as we continue to chronicle 100 years of film, one story at a time. Until next time, have a great rest of your day.